Death Claims, a Dave Brandstetter mystery. Book 2. Author, Joseph Hansen. Publisher, University of Wisconsin Press, Terrace Books. Narrator, Eric Aust. Chapter 6. Knight met him in the courtyard. He inched his sleeve back. 6:10. His mouth tightened. He ought to have phoned earlier. He had to phone now. Was there a booth? It waited in a dark corner like a child left over from a long-ago twilight game of hide-and-seek. It was an old wooden booth with wired glass and overgrown with ivy. When he stepped inside and unfolded the door shut to make the light turn on, tendrils of ivy groped through the hinge crack like roots into a coffin. A man wouldn't talk long here, not if he hoped to leave. He listened to the quarter rattle down. He dialed. "Hello?" It had rung only once. That was a bad sign. Behind the voice, the stereo came through. Edith Piaf, Joliet Greco, Yves Montand. He couldn't make out. It didn't matter. He felt bad about them all. As he felt bad about the copies of Paris Match that strewed the living room, as he felt bad about each new Gannett letter in the New Yorker. For Doug, they kept John Paul alive, the smashed auto racer he had slept with, boy and man, during the 2 decades he'd worked for NATO in France. Dave's stomach muscles grabbed. He wanted to shout, "Turn it off!" He didn't shout. They never shouted at each other. They weren't on that kind of footing, and maybe that was too bad. He said, "That's the kitchen phone. You're cooking, so this call doesn't count. I'll be there." "It's the bedroom phone. I'm not cooking. I just got out of the shower." Dave could see him small, spare, palely naked, so like Rod, his own dead, who wouldn't lie down, hunching his shoulder to hold the receiver while he scrubbed his shag of graying hair with one of Rod's red towels and dripped on Rod's white rug. "I've been at the shop since morning." He meant Sawyer's pet shop, kept by his bright, beaky little mother, in one of those gray enclaves of neglect Los Angeles calls neighborhood business districts. Emergency. The front of the big aquarium gave. We lost a lot of lives, expensive ones, and it cut a hell out of my hand. But the tank is fixed, and I'm fixed. And there's buku sand in the shower. "Well, don't cook," Dave said. "I'm 75 miles away, and I've still got a man to see here. Will you drive up? El Molino. There must be a good restaurant. I'll phone Madge. She'll know." "Ask her to join you," Doug said. "She's closer. It's a hell of a drive from here." "Dave, and it's the worst time of day for traffic." He didn't mind traffic. He lived to drive that red Ferrari of his, and he drove it the way Sergeant played the violin. "And I'm tired, and my hand hurts." "I'm sorry," Dave said. "Did you see a doctor?" "Yes, it's elegantly stitched. It still hurts. I'll see you when you get here." "All right." "Tomorrow," Dave said. "I'll phone you in the morning." He hung up. He hadn't known he was going to say that, or had he? He felt hollow. Since last November, when they'd met at the sudden end of a policyholder's heartbeats in a sand-flea beach town rooming house, they hadn't slept apart. This would be the first night. Did he feel bad about that? If so, why? He waited a few seconds for an answer. It didn't come. But the hollowness didn't go. It began to hurt. He fed the phone a dime and dialed Madge. The place was called the Hound and Hawk. Thatch roof, white plaster, half timbering outside, fumed oak rafters, and paneling inside. Leaded windows, flame light from logs in a huge fireplace, glinted on the silver, crystal white linen of still vacant tables, and reflected ruddy in the polished broad-board floor. He crossed to a short set of warped oak steps that climbed to a door marked Tap Room. Torchlight, hanging rows of pewter mugs, taps, bunged into oaken cask ends, a barmaid out of Holborn, frill-capped, buxom, rosy-cheeked, from somewhere a trickle of Morris dance music, lute, hoot boy, tabor. He hoped Madge would hurry. He had a low tolerance for sham. He ordered Glenlivet, with water on the side and put it away fast, dodging thoughts of Doug. And a second, and was working on a third when she stood beside him, tugging off driving gloves, unpegged her duffel coat, shaking back her wind-blown hair, boy-cropped, gray. He caught the tang of sea air when she hiked her long, fine bones onto the stool next to his. She gave him a good smile. It had been good for him for 20-odd years. Dependable, real. He wished it was all he needed. He gave the smile back bleakly. She pushed the gloves into a pocket, told the girl, "Margarita, thanks," and laid a lean, freckled hand on Dave's. "You look tired." Repeated encounters with nice, normal, everyday people who kill each other for money, he said, can wear a man down after a couple of decades. She winced for him. Again? Who this time? A loving son, a not-so-loving wife, a pretty young mistress, a business partner. He dug out cigarettes, lit one for her, one for himself. Or none of the above. His fingers turned the steady glass in its circle of wet on the bar top, blinking through smoke. He watched them. If I knew, I'd leave word with the management here that they've got the wrong Elizabeth and go home. Home? She cocked an eyebrow. I thought you asked on the phone to stay over with me. You'd driven all over Southern California today, and you were white. The ashtray was thick pewter, stamped with a coat of arms, hounded and hooded hawk. He tapped a cigarette on it. She said, I suppose you're aware that's never happened before. He shrugged. I'm not as young as I once was. It's not that. You'd have driven from Tierra del Fuego to get back to Rod at night. And it's not your work you're tired of either. If you'll permit me an educated guess, it's Doug. Am I wrong? He drank and gave the flame-shadowed room a long, skeptical look. I know you've never led me astray, but can the food here really be eaten? Trust me. Her drink came creamy with the rim of the stem. Glass frosty with salt. She tasted it, nodded, brewed, set it down with a delicate click, and touched his hand again. Talk about it, Davy. He glanced at her in a way. You talk about it. Ah, ready for an opinion now, are we? His laugh was short and wry. You've had one prepared for some time. From the minute I met him. I thought I'd been masterfully deceptive about it. You knew. That day at the raceway, the two of you with your heads together, the Ferrari owner, the Porsche owner, all that chat about Formula A versus Formula 1, 3 liters versus 5 liters, V8s versus flat 12s. New Year's it had been, hard blue sky, 2-mile stretch of clean white grandstand, flat black drag strip cars like toy shop sharks, hammerheads crawling on squat tires, then raw-throated engine roar, track a jagged slash through a new green landscape along it, McLarens, Lolas, BRMs, screaming, snarling, skidding for the inside, the front of the money, average speed, maybe 90, top speed, maybe twice 90, and off to the north, indifferent, brown mountains. Afterward, Doug, eyes shining down in the clean concrete pit where the French team drank and laughed, Madge with him, very gay, Dave outside, above, hands jammed into car coat pockets, shoulders hunched against wind, that wrap torn, programs around his legs, watching thoughtful. It was a little too real. Sure, you enjoyed it, but not that much. And not that way. You don't enjoy things that way, Doug. Didn't know, but I knew. She had a mouthful of tequila, lemon salt. She shook her head, swallowed. No, you mustn't think I don't like him. I do. That makes it sadder. Then what? A hand touched his shoulder. He turned a silver-haired man, smiled deferentially. He wore a robe of brown velvet, ankle-length, open down the front, gold-edged, with hanging sleeves. am an attendant lord, Dave thought. One that will do to swill a progress. The dining room is beginning to fill. Sir, may I reserve a table for you and the lady? Thank you. Dave slid a bill from his wallet and folded it in the man's hand. Not too near the fire, please. And can you leave us a menu? He did. It was folio-sized, the parchment cover stamped with the shield, the hound, the hawk, and crusty gilt. He dug out his reading glasses, let the boughs fall open, slipping them on, opening the menu, and turned it so the torchlight flickered on the lists. Crude black letter type, quaint spelling. No 4 and 20 blackbirds, he wondered. Steak and kidney pie, Madge pointed it out. Steak and kidney pie was how the hired scholar had rendered it. It's beyond belief. Like the rest of the place, Dave dropped the menu, clicked the glasses shut, pushed them away. Hungry? And when she nodded, he studded out his cigarette, laid bills on the bar, got down from his stool, and handed Madge off hers. Send another margarita to our table, please. Another Glenlivet? For you, sir? The barmaid's accent was Hollywood Cockney. Thanks. He nodded and moved with Madge to the crooked steps again and down to where the firelight now had human faces, too ready. The waiters were playing card characters from Alice in Wonderland, belted open-sided tunics, green velvet, hound and hawk stitched in gold, and the back yellow tights a riband to the knee, loose shirts with puffed white sleeves. They looked embarrassed. Dave wondered if their wives laughed at them. Their kids wouldn't. Not kids. These days, the problem would be to keep the kids from expropriating, especially the slouchy yellow velveteen caps. Their waiter was missing his. Dave bet it was at a drive-in movie right now, a basketball game, a taco stand. After their drinks had arrived and he'd ordered and spoken to the caller, in a robe like the host, only wine red, of course, he lit cigarettes for himself and Madge and asked her, "Why did you wait till now?" "Because you're the giver of wise counsel, remember? Me? 20 wrong choices in as many years. I never had anything but questions. You had the answers. I've run out. I'm ready for yours." He looks like Rod. That was all there was to it. I was shocked. You'd be so simple? He's a good human being. He's a grown-up. That was always your formula for me. Her smile, her head shake were rueful. I never followed it. Until Sylvia. Miss Levy was plain and 35, a college librarian. Nothing like a handsome Coltage boy, girls. Madge, a clever and successful designer, not of her life, but of textiles and wall coverings, had pursued from one calamity to the next. Through a wreckage of years, none of them had been worth her time, certainly not her grief. Most had simply used her. It had pained Dave to witness. How is Sylvia? Wonderful, Madge glowed. It was a good advice, Davy, even if it did take 2 decades of disaster to make me accept it. I'm grateful, he shrugged. Other people's problems are easy. All right, let me try at yours. She tasted the margarita, set it down, looked grave. Yes, he's a good human being. Yes, he's a grown-up, as are you. But when you found each other, you were both in deep trouble. Not used to loneliness, not able to cope. You'd had Rod all your adult life. He'd had John Paul. He's shown me photographs of Jean Paul in magazines, newspapers, souvenir programs, French, English, Italian, yellowing at the edges. Dave knew them, in a cardboard carton in a closet. More than once, he'd started to throw them out. Madge said he was underweight with beautiful square shoulders, like you. She reached across to brush the fall of straight hair off his forehead. He liked her touch, cool, dry. Blonde like you, blue-eyed. She took the hand back and her smile regretted. It couldn't have been a sadder coincidence. People have to look like somebody, he said. She frowned, picked up her glass, studied him across its circle of salt. Why don't you want to go home and sleep with him tonight? For the same reason he didn't want to come up here and have dinner with me. She nodded, tasted the drink, set it down. Because he can't be Rod, and because you can't be Jean-Paul. I guess we both figured it out about the same time. With a finger, he turned the little block of ice in his glass and watched the straw yellow whiskey curl around it. Not very quick, not very bright. You could try loving each other under your real identities. You're both worth loving. You've told me who's going to tell him. You are, tonight, when you get home. Home? He said. Where's that? A Gay Mysteries Audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.